One wrong move can leave you stuck paying 2 mortgages, or worse, having nowhere to live. If you're trying to decide whether to sell your current home first or buy your next one first, this video could save you from a major financial mistake. Every week, I help families just like you figure out the safest and smartest path for their move. If you're feeling stuck or unsure about your next steps, text or call me at 704-231-6024 or hit the link in the description. We'll talk through your options and find a plan that works for you. So let's talk about buying first. There's pros and cons to that. On the pro side, what's going to happen is you don't have to rush to sell your home because you're going to have a home to live in because you're buying your home first. You can transition smoothly. You can leave some items for staging. You could take all your items, and leave some. So the con of it is more of the unknown on when you're actually going to close on your old home, the one that you're selling. So what that means is you're going to have to be real strategic on when it hits the market, knowing the data, like how many days on market before going under contract, knowing the market value for that area, knowing how many buyers are looking in that area and things of that nature. So you don't have a lot of carrying costs because you can end up having 2 mortgages that you have to pay. So keep that in mind. So now we're going to talk about selling first. Let's say you sell first and then buy later. The pros and cons of that. Pro is you have that house off your hands now, okay? You have all the equity, you have the profit, and all of that in your bank account. So you can maybe temporarily, rent a home, maybe live with family, maybe a short-term rental, Airbnb, things of that nature. One of the pros about that is you actually have money in the bank to do whatever you have to do to make your family comfortable. So the con of it is that temporary housing, renting or living with a family member and things of that nature, that's going to be more moving. So you're probably going to have to move like 3 times. Actually, because you're going to have to move out from the house that you're selling, move into the house that you're renting, and then move out of the house, actually 4 times, then move out of the house you're renting or temporary housing, and then move into your new home. So for some people, if you have children, a lot of children, things of that nature, that's a lot of moving, packing and going. So my clients that choose that option, what I like to tell them is to maybe think about renting a storage unit where most of your bulky items, or just live off limited furniture and keep the rest in the storage. So you don't have to, when it is time to move, you don't have to keep moving a lot of items. But keep in mind, you will have to move quite a bit. So the next option is extending closing. So when you find that home and you make an offer, I'm going to negotiate for you. So I'm going to already know your wants, your needs. I'm going to talk to the other agent on the other side, and let them know, my client is needing extended closing. Is your client up for that? Sometimes the actual seller says yes because they have things they have to do as well. They probably have to find another place to live. If they don't already have that, they may need time to get their things together and say, yes, we could do that for them. There's different options, but one thing that I want you to remember is that it does not hurt to ask. Okay, there's always you got to have communication, and you have to negotiate, and that's part of the process. And with extended closing, what's going to happen is we're going to have the option to ask the seller's agent, let's say instead of taking 30 to 45 days to close, maybe can we do an extra month and maybe take 60 days to close? So that means shortening maybe the due diligence period and then extending that closing, because you may need time to close on your house and move into that house. An example of extended closing is something I did when I purchased my home. No, I wasn't selling in New York City, but however, I was relocating. And I needed the extra time because the way I had everything set up for my job was starting one day. I was leaving the other job another day. And then in between that time, I wanted to strategically plan my move so everything would be comfortable. Because at that time, it was only me and my daughter making that move. So I needed to make sure that I had enough time to get her settled. So when I moved to North Carolina from New York City, I had an extended closing. And what that entailed for me is basically upfront, we asked in the offer if we can basically extend the closing like for 60 days. So I believe I went under contract in like February-ish, and I know I closed the middle of May. So that's an extended period. Usually closing once you go under contract happens within 30 to 45 days. But however, it fit my needs and it also fitted the seller's needs. And again, all you have to do is ask. Now let's get into rent backs. So a rent back is basically you as a seller, when you close on your home, the new buyer is renting the home back to you. So that's leaving you time to stay in the home. Sometimes there's a cost associated and sometimes it's not. It's going to depend too if there's a buyer's or seller's, or if it's a seller's market or on the negotiations. That's just what it's going to boil down to. But however, it is an option. I've had a seller in the past use that option as a rent back, and at that time, she rented back the home for $0. That was at that time. It was definitely a seller's market back then, and she had the leverage. So we was able to use that leverage to maximize what she needed to do for her comfortability. Let's go over the different market conditions. So let's say a seller's market and a buyer's market. So in a seller's market, there is more demand than inventory. And for you as a seller, when you're selling your home, that means your home is going to sell pretty fast. It's just going to be, when and for how much. So with that, you definitely have to be real strategic on where you're going to live, what you're going to do. Sometimes some of my clients, they may tell me to advise the buyer's agent that they want to have an extended close up front. Some people want to use it for leverage. They want to wait until we actually get an offer and then we can start discussing things. So what I like to do is just give my clients the pros and cons of it and let them decide on what they want to do to make their home selling process more comfortable. So let's say you're selling in a buyer's market. A buyer's market is more inventory and less demand. So that means there's a lot for buyers out here to pick and choose on what they want. And if you're planning on selling your home, that's going to be relative to you if you're in a buyer's market, because you're going to have to get strategic. I love that word strategic because that is really what you have to do on how you're going to put your house on the market to sell. Okay, so you're going to have to look at those continuous days on market in your neighborhood. You're going to have to look into pricing, market value. You want to, depending on if you already have a house that's under contract, you're going to want to strategically place it where your house is not staying on the market for an extended period. And that's going over with your realtor, those specifics on what you want, on what you need, and the numbers. So I want to give you an example. I recently had a client that they had to sell their home in order to purchase. So, of course, we had our buyer consultation, our seller consultation, and we kind of, we set up what it looked like. They were already ahead of the game. They knew the area that they wanted to live in. So that made things very, very more easier for me as the real estate agent. So what we did when they found that home that they wanted, we went ahead and placed the offer. I let the agent know. I gave him everything. Look, we haven't put their house on the market yet. However, this is the continuous days on the market. This is what it's going to be priced at. I let him know our marketing plan so he can see that we are strategizing and that we are trying to get the home sold so we can buy his home. And he was also open to extending that closing period, making sure that we had that continuous days on market before we go under contract on his house that we were selling, and then giving that time to close. He was open to that. So that made everything very seamless. It went really, really well. But that just comes with, you have to be open, you have to communicate, and you have to negotiate. But remember, no one will know what you want unless you ask. So asking is key. So you've listened to this video. You see all of the options that you have if you want to sell your home and buy another. But the main thing that I want y'all to take from this is the strategic planning. You're going to have to know what you want and you're going to have to go for it and stick to your plan, because you made the plan for a reason. And just know when that time is there, I'm there to assist you.